Okay, today I'm going to try to form an opinion and see what happens. Got up this morning, went out to the front door, took a look, see if any presents were delivered by the Christmas elves, and saw a Sephora box. Sephora only gets delivered in Canada by Canada Post, which is interesting because up until just today, I thought they were on strike. So, hadn't heard anything about it in the news, hadn't heard anything about it on the radio, hadn't heard anything about it from anybody. So, I went and I did a little Googling and found out that the Labor Relations Board ordered the federal employees of the post office back to work. I am sure, like my wife, there are plenty of Canadians who are very happy to know that their packages are going to be delivered in time for Christmas, or close enough anyways. But I want to form an opinion about this, and I want to see what you guys have to say about it. You see, in Canada, and in most free countries in the world, there are some forms of labor laws that were forged over the past 100 years or so to secure the right for people, men and women, who are citizens, to withhold their labor from an employer if they satisfy certain conditions that are set out and agreed upon by the employees, the employers, and the government. These laws that were put into effect to secure the right to do this were hard fought, and mostly hard fought by people who are quite left of center, which is hard for a conservative like me to come to terms with, because I'm not a fan of things that are left of center. However, I am a fan of the law, or at least the idea of what the law is. The way I see the law, and maybe, it's a little bit crazy, at least modern laws, under the guise of the rule of law, is that these are rules of engagement that are agreed upon beforehand, voted on, enacted in such a way that they apply to everybody. In other words, the people who wrote them aren't even able to supersede the law. So no one is above it. Laws have been around for thousands of years. You can go back to the Code of Hammurabi, but the Code of Hammurabi didn't apply to Hammurabi because he was the king. So there were people above the law, and it wasn't until you get to, around about 1200 AD, where you had a serious concerted push by a stable-ish society to make it so that even the sovereign wasn't above at least certain laws. And then, it took quite a bit of time. It's not really until you get to the American Revolution that you end up with a system that was designed entirely about adhering to the rule of law. So you've got laws, and some of those laws, in the instance that we're talking about, pertain to the right to withhold your labor if you meet certain circumstances. Now, I know a teensy tiny bit about how unions work, and how what you have to do in order to put yourself in a strike position. the Canada Post people and their union did all of that. And they went on strike, and there was nothing illegal about the strike. It wasn't wildcatting, it wasn't anything. The government had refused to budge, the union had refused to budge, and so the employees voted to strike, and they did. And they were out there and they were picketing every day. I know they were because I saw them. And, not the most pleasant time to be picketing in Toronto. Damp, cold, windy, all of that kind of stuff this time of year. So again, a lot of people upset about this, including the wife. It's Christmas. Why would you, do this at this time? You're just leveraging the people to get what you want and all of that. And yeah, that's true. There is no doubt that this was an opportune time to have a strike if you're the federal postal employee, because you have the government over a barrel, and the government wants to look good in the eyes of the people. So what did they do? They let the strike go on for a little bit, and then the Labor Relations Board, under the direction of the federal government, which is right now looking like it's only one guy, Pierre Trudeau, although I bet you everybody was on board with this, including the Conservatives, because if you take a look at the track record, the Conservatives really like to legislate people back to work. Now, what happens when you legislate somebody back to work? Well, you write on a piece of paper, you are going back to work on such and such time, on such and such date. And if you don't, you will be fired because you will be in contravention of this little piece of paper that I'm writing out here. I got a problem with that, despite the fact that I am no fan of lefty unions. Like I said, I'm a fan of the rule of law, and the rule of law shouldn't be something that's so easily superseded by saying, well, what you're doing is inconvenient for us. It's inconvenient for the people who we want to make happy, so we're going to set aside the rule of law, and we're just going to make a decree like the kings of old, and we're going to tell you that you need to go back to work on pain of losing your livelihood. Well, I got a problem with that. Number one, it's a cheat. Okay. Number two, it's kind of going against what we have in our Constitution, which is, the Constitution is a framework to write laws. Write a law based on what you put in the Constitution so that everybody, should they choose to read and learn what that Constitution is, understands what a law can and cannot be and how it should and should not be followed. So to just go and say we're going to set aside this law because it is inconvenient for us is disingenuous at best, dictatorial at worst. And again, even if you are on the side that says, thank goodness I am getting my stuff now, and well, geez, it's too bad that it's unfair for these people out there who are just like you and I, working, paying taxes, showing up, dealing with bad bosses, traffic, you name it. Well, it's too bad for these people. It's good for me, and therefore I have no problems with what's going on here. In fact, I have so few problems with what's going on here, I'm not even going to try to examine it because, quite frankly, I've got a lot of things I have to do, and, thinking about things like the law and how hard it was fought and Magna Cartas and constitutions and all that. who cares? Okay, it doesn't apply to me. I'm happy. I'm getting my makeup from Sephora. Yay. Okay, let's get Christmas on with. My response to that is, okay, but what happens if they choose to have their little law and then set it aside when it has to do with something that applies to you? What do you do then? Do you cry? Do you say, this isn't fair, woe is me? And then an honest person has to look at it in such a way that says, oh geez, when other people who are like me, citizens of this country, were in the same boat, I poo-pooed it, I celebrated it even. So how can I then ask for help when this unfair decree that was just written, just a piece of paper that was written, and was going to be enforced by the police, because, I mean, it's a fancy piece of paper that thing was written on. You know, now it's on, the shoe is on the other foot, and I'm in trouble, and this isn't fair. Who's going to save me? Well, the answer to that is nobody, because, you know, we let this go by. We didn't even think about it. It wasn't even in the news. I had to go and search for it. Nobody's talking about this. They weren't even celebrating it and say, yippee, yay, yay, because I think even the press understands just teensy tiny little bit how much BS this decree is. And this has happened an awful lot. It happens a lot with the teachers, another group that people don't tend to like, but are under the protection of the law, the same law that we are. And when the teachers are forced back to work, everybody celebrates because, you know, our summer vacations are going to go on and we don't have to afford the nanny or the daycare or the whatever in order to go out, make the money to pay the taxes. You see, the worst part of all of this, the thing that nobody's going to talk about, is that the government can unilaterally supersede a constitutionally written law. Nobody says a word. If Joe down the street or Mary up on the hill decides unilaterally that they are not going to conform to the law, Joe and Mary go to jail, no questions asked, don't pass go, don't collect $200, nothing. Okay? That's the epitome of unfair. You can't do that. You can't let one side set aside laws and not the other. Okay? All that really is a dictatorship. A nice dictatorship, a not so mean dictatorship, only every now and then dictatorship, but a dictatorship nonetheless. A law should be a law, and if you write a law and the law is hard to deal with, well, then it's incumbent upon you, the legislators, to come up with a way to change the law legally in the full sight of the populace who voted for you. That I can be with. I can be totally... If you want to make it illegal to strike in Canada, which isn't going to happen, by the way, because these people want to get elected and there's still a lot of union jobs and unions get out the vote. So that's not going to happen. But if you did that anyways and you said, we're going to take away the right to strike from the Canadian people, then do it. Stand by it. And now that's the law. And you don't have to supersede anything. You don't have to say the law is only good when, you know, it's nice and sunny. It's a beautiful blue sky and You know, the ice cream truck is playing the music. That's when the laws work. But you know, rainy day, snowstorm, you get shut in by a snowdrift. No, law doesn't apply anymore. If it doesn't work that way for Joe and Mary, and you and me, and every other hard-working person out there who relies upon the stability of the law in order to understand how the rules work so that we don't get into trouble, then we're in trouble. And so I guess the opinion that I formed here is that despite the fact that I am not a fan of unions, I am not a fan of leftist doctrine, I am not a fan of even having my postal service taken away from me, I am a fan of adhering to the rules, and I am a fan of supporting hardworking people who are adhering to the rules in order to get a decent paycheck, okay, that was taken away from them by a government that hyperinflated the money through poor governance, both nationally and internationally, monetarily, fiscally, the whole shebang, laid at the feet of COVID, where, in my opinion, the government really got out of control and did a lot of silly things that, you know, ended up, you know, with, you know, milk being unbelievably high price, bread, all the things, like try to buy a steak. My goodness, you need to put a right arm on layaway just to have a nice T-bone steak. And that's, the government did that. It wasn't Joe and Paul and Mary and you and me, the taxpayers. We did what was asked of us. The government is the one that did this to us. And then when the postal workers go and they say, well, you know what,